The HPV virus, dangerous, common, it's a major problem, but there is a vaccine, and we're told that young girls at school should be receiving it for their safety. This has been discussed many times. The Catholic Church has problems with this. We're going to discuss their problems. And the clash between the Church and the school board has become particularly intense in Alberta. Robin Oback from the National Post wrote a column this week critical of the Church. Lisa Globe from Campaign Life, he's rather a fan of Catholicism. Start fighting, ladies. You wrote in the column, the Catholic Church can believe what it wants to believe and preach that, but this is a school board and what, the Church shouldn't interfere?
Well, that's the funny thing, though, and this is a conflict that we often see come up when you have religious school boards that are publicly funded. Here we had another case where this year in particular, Alberta is rolling out the HPV vaccine to both boys and girls. And as part of the information package that was given out, there was this letter by a group of Catholic bishops basically saying, you know, first of all, there's no medical consensus on this vaccine, which I don't think is actually true. And also there was a suggestion that inoculating children might, you know, encourage them to
enable them perhaps?
Right, to be sexually active. So that was sort of contained in this letter that was sent out to parents, and that's where the story sort of came from.
Yeah. How young are the children who will be, it's an injection, I assume?
It's an injection, yeah. Sometimes it's in 2 stages. It depends on exactly which type of vaccine. There's
and
2
they're
different
what, 12,
types.
13?
About 12, 13, I believe it's grade 5 to grade 9, so sometime in that window is when they'd receive the shot.
This could be, if a girl, she may not be promiscuous, it may be the first boy she's ever known, but he may have had one other partner and she could be infected. I mean, if it does increase safety, enabling, encouraging promiscuity, premarital sex, do you really think so?
Well, I don't think that's really what Bishop Henry is saying. I think he's saying that it doesn't, you know, young girls or young boys aren't going to get this vaccine and then run out and have all the sex that they weren't going to have before, but it sends mixed messages, because if they're trying to do abstinence-only education and then on the other hand say, well, but if you do have sex, well, here's the vaccine, it does send conflicting messages. And what the Catholic Church and what Bishop Henry is saying isn't contradicting the medical professionals, but it's actually going alongside with it. In my research, I actually found the Canadian Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology echoes the abstinence-only education when fighting the HPV vaccine, saying that abstinence is the most effective way to prevent HPV infection first and foremost. So just getting to the brunt of it is, does abstinence-only education work? That's one part of the issue. And then the other part of the issue is the HPV vaccine actually even safe for women and men to take? If
both, if two people marry each other and they're both completely celibate at that point, then of course there will be no infection. But let's say that a girl who is a virgin marries a guy and maybe had one other sexual encounter. Well, that could be it. I mean, he could now infect her. No one's done anything wrong, for goodness sake, but it's very serious. I mean, surely if we can protect, I believe in the dignity of the person. I don't think promiscuity is noble in any way, but we have to be realistic as well.
Absolutely. So let's be realistic in actually determining what does the HPV vaccine do. Does it actually, is it actually effective, and is it safe for, because they're saying girls or boys that are 9 years old. So even one of the founders, the main researchers of the HPV vaccine, her name's Dr. Diane Harper, has come out staunchly against the HPV vaccine, saying that there are enough serious side effects reported after the use of Gardasil, which point to the vaccine being riskier than the cervical cancer it purports to prevent. So even she is saying that the side effects are so strong that it totally wipes out.
At the age of 9 or later?
She just said taking Gardasil no matter what age. Yeah.
You know, I actually haven't heard that. It's a point that a lot of people come up when we do talk about vaccines, talking about the possible side effects. I think here, though, when you look at what has happened in the past, and I think it's only been about 8 years or so since this vaccine has been rolled out, there was one study in the U.S. that found a decrease of 56% in terms of the prevalence of HPV. And I think another point to sort of address is the fact that we are talking about fairly young kids, you know, 10, 11, 12, having this. In a way, I think, you know, I would hope at the very least that sexual activity isn't even on their mind. So rather than giving that sort of green light, it's just another shot in a series of shots that these kids are having. It doesn't even point to anything sexual. They go to school, they get a shot, they go home, they get a cookie maybe. So I think it's a bit of a fallacious argument to bring in that issue.
That's a good point, because I must admit, when I first heard about this, our kids are now older, but I thought, my God, when our daughters were 11, I mean, they really didn't know what all this was about. And it didn't apply to us, but would it be opening up a whole new world to them? Would it be encouraging a sexuality that was far too premature? I mean, that is a valid concern for parents.
I think for sure. I think the other thing to take into account, though, there are lots of reasons why teens, at that age, choose to have sex or not to have sex. Part of the reason, of course, is concern about STIs, HPV, HIV, gonorrhea, all those other things. There's also a fear about pregnancy, which is still there. There's also religious, moral, ethical concerns and concerns in terms of interpersonal relationships. How are other people going to see me? So we're talking about all these different elements that play a role, and the HPV vaccine addresses a fraction of one of them. So I think in that way, it's hard to sort of say, well, then we introduce this concept of sexual activity when really all it's doing is potentially eliminating a fraction of one concern.
Okay. If there were no side effects at all, and I don't know the science well enough to argue with you about that, but if there were no side effects, would you still oppose it?
I would say that why are we forced to bring it into the schools? It's free for parents to go get it in Alberta and Prince Edward Island. So why are we forcing it on young kids? Many times kids come home with permission slips, parents sign them, and it is a big deal because there is an element of contradicting that abstinence-only education. And so I would say, why can't we just leave it to the parents to decide what vaccines to give their kids and what not to give their kids?
They're not forced to have this, surely.
They're not forced to have it, of course, but why even bring it into a school that sends mixed messages when the Catholic schools have a constitutional right to teach Catholic teaching?
You're a very realistic young woman. We have a fairly similar morality. Abstinence, I think it's important that young people, I think particularly young women, because there's a lot of pressure on them, understand the worth of their person and that just because some idiot boy says, I love you, doesn't mean he really does, and all that sort of thing. But a lot of young people are going to be sexually active. I don't even mean promiscuous, but just a certain sort of activity. Teach them morals and values and virtues, hope as much as you can, but a lot of them will be active. And I mean, I think the side effects argument is a bit of a digression. I think it is about the Catholic Church saying, we believe you should be pure and chaste before marriage, and knowing that the world is really giving a very different message.
Well, I mean, I think that we have to look at if abstinence-only education works, because in the U.S. it is federally funded, so they wouldn't federally fund something that wasn't effective.
A lot of pressure from evangelicals, though. I mean, come on.
But there still are studies done that do say that it does work, and I think that having the HPV vaccine it doesn't address the cause of what happened, but it's just masking it as like a Band-Aid solution to what could potentially happen. And I think that the side effects are very real.
Okay.
And it's interesting, too, that you said that they're not forced to get the vaccine, because when Merck and company, the original founders of Gardasil, wanted to institute it into the American School Board, they wanted it to be so that 11 and 12-year-olds had to get it, or else they would be suspended, and it would go against their school. So that's something that they originally wanted.
No, I don't think so. And I think it's a different sort of issue. I think when we talk about having these shots available in schools, I understand that argument. On the other hand, you often get it from doctors, and if you look at it from a public health perspective, you have so many people walking into doctors' offices for something that can be easily administered in schools. It's part of the reason why in a lot of provinces we get our flu shots at the pharmacies, because it just frees up the system in that way.
Good discussion.